Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a really fascinating real-world case study. We're looking at what happens when a highly successful medical professional tries to completely outsmart the tax system. We're going to break down the exact financial mechanics he used, how he eventually got caught, and the totally devastating legal ruling that came down on him afterward. So this isn't just a bunch of numbers. It's honestly a masterclass in why trying to aggressively exploit tax loopholes can and often will backfire spectacularly. Okay, let's dive right into this. A recent news report laid out a wild cautionary tale about a private specialist who really thought he had crafted the absolute foolproof setup to shield his massive income from those higher personal tax rates. But, well, the taxman ultimately had the last laugh here. We're going to use the details from this exact report to reverse engineer his whole entire strategy. Part 1, the $1 million loophole. Let's see how he actually pulled this off. So, our story starts with a surprisingly low number, $5,000. On his personal tax returns, this incredibly successful, deeply experienced private medical specialist claimed a modest monthly salary of just $5 to $6 grand. Now, that's a perfectly fine salary for an average worker, sure. But for an elite medical specialist running his own private practice, it just doesn't quite add up, does it? And here's exactly why it didn't add up. Behind the scenes, while he was declaring that modest $5,000 salary to the government, this exact same doctor was secretly getting additional payouts averaging over $2 million a year. $2 million. Just let that sink in for a second. He's bringing in millions, but legally telling the tax authorities he was basically making a middle-class wage. Now, the whole motivation behind this elaborate setup really comes down to one simple comparison. Under the standard personal income tax regime for his area, earning millions of dollars would push him straight into the top personal tax bracket of 24%. But by setting up a shell company structure, those earnings were suddenly subjected to a corporate tax rate of just 17%. That 7% difference on multiple millions of dollars? Yeah, that translates to hundreds of thousands of dollars in annual tax savings. A huge chunk of cash. So here is exactly how the money moved around. Over 6 tax assessments between 2013 and 2018, the doctor extracted a massive $12 million from his companies. Here's the breakdown. 75% of it, or $9 million, was paid out as dividends. And since the company had already paid that lower 17% corporate tax, these dividends were entirely tax-exempt for him personally. The other 25%, so about $3 million, was given to him as interest-free shareholders' loans. Since those are technically debts that have to be repaid, they aren't taxable either. On paper, it looked like a watertight financial fortress. All right, moving on to Chapter 2, The Taxman Strikes Back. This whole setup, as clever as it seemed, built a massive red flag for auditors. Before setting up his private practice, this doctor was working at a government hospital drawing a very realistic monthly salary of $45,000. Yet the literal minute he left to open his own highly profitable clinic, his salary mysteriously dropped to just $6,000. Look, tax systems today are heavily digitized. The algorithms easily spot when a high-earning professional's income suddenly falls off a cliff without any actual drop in their business revenue. To combat this, the tax authority deployed a very specific legal weapon. They invoked a provision within the Income Tax Act, specifically Section 33, which gives them the power to completely disregard and just shoot down any corporate arrangement that exists mainly to avoid paying tax. Using this, they essentially pierced the corporate veil, completely ignored the shell companies, and assessed all those massive payouts as the doctor's own personal taxable income. Game over. And hey, if you think this doctor was just incredibly unlucky, think again. He was actually just one of 279 high-income earners caught in the exact same audit sweep using similar sham structures. This wasn't some isolated incident. It was a massive, systemic crackdown on professionals who were abusing corporate structures that were originally designed to encourage legitimate entrepreneurship, but were being used as personal tax shields instead. Chapter 3, The Court's Final Verdict. Let's see what happens in front of a judge. Now, what's really interesting about this is how he tried to defend himself. When his back was truly against the wall, the doctor deployed one of the oldest tricks in the book, the classic blame the accountant defense. He basically argued that he was completely unaware of the specific tax advantages he was getting, and that he had just blindly followed the advice of his accountant when setting up these companies. He tried to paint himself as this innocent medical professional who just trusted the wrong financial advisors. Well, the judge was having absolutely none of it. In a pretty devastating verdict, the court noted that the doctor couldn't even produce the accountant to testify on his behalf to prove this was all done in good faith. The judge explicitly stated that the doctor, quote, turned a blind eye to what his tax obligations could be in the hope that legal consequences would not follow. Plus, the court found zero evidence that the profits from these companies had ever been used to pursue new ideas, expand the business, or serve any genuine commercial purpose at all. They literally just existed to dodge taxes. Finally, Chapter 4, 3 Crucial Tax Lessons. So the crucial point is, what can we actually learn from this multi-million-dollar mistake? Whether you're self-employed, a freelancer, or running a large enterprise, these are principles you absolutely cannot afford to ignore. Let's walk through the 3 core takeaways here. First, digitization makes detection incredibly easy. In an era where income data is stored and cross-referenced by algorithms, sudden drops in reported income while your actual wealth grows, that's going to flag you for an audit immediately. Second, your companies must have a real commercial purpose. Governments offer lower corporate tax rates to encourage actual business growth and reinvestment, not to give you a hiding place for your personal salary. If your company doesn't actually do anything besides hold your money, it's a sham. And third, you cannot hide behind professionals. At the end of the day, you are the ones signing your tax returns. Claiming ignorance or blaming your accountant is simply not going to save you in a court of law. Which leaves us with this final, vital question to ask ourselves. Are you building a legitimate business with a genuine commercial purpose, or are you just relying on a loophole? This case proves that relying on legal technicalities without real business substance is essentially just building a house of cards. Eventually, the taxman will come knocking, and as we've seen today, they almost always have the last laugh. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and I will catch you in the next one.